everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council for the 3rd of February 2021. So the meeting is open to the public and will be live streamed. I'd like to thank all of those of you who are in the room today and acknowledge everyone watching on Council's social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, the Councillors, the CEO, the General Manager of Planning and Development and staff. I'd like to open the meeting by acknowledging the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka and Guybil peoples and Jarrawa peoples, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. I don't think we have any apologies today for today's meeting, but I acknowledge the absence of Councillor Carl. So we have anyone who's seeking leave. Councillor O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to request a leave of absence, please, from the committee meetings to be held on Wednesday, the 10th of February 2021, please.
Someone move that Councillor O'Shea has leave of absence on the 10th of February 2021. Councillor Von Hoff and Councillor Antonio. All those in favour? It's carried. So we have a declaration of a declarable conflict of interest. Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Declaration of declarable conflict of interest, item 6.0. MCUI/2020/2715 material change of use impact service station located at 133 to 137 North Street, Harlexton, Queensland 4350. I inform this meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 150EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. This declarable conflict of interest arises because the property at 131 North Street, Harlexton, is owned by the RF and MM Taylor Superannuation Fund, of which I am a member. The property at 131 North Street, Harlexton, neighbours the site mentioned in the report. I propose to leave and stay away from the place where the meeting is being held while this matter is discussed and voted on.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. So can I have someone move for the suspension of standing orders? Councillor O'Shea, Councillor McDonald, all those in favour? It's carried. So we move to item 4, which is going to be presented to us by Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, council officers, ladies and gentlemen. This report presents the assessment of a development application for a variation request and reconfiguring a lot at 28 Willis Road, Meringadan West. Wendy, could we have attachment 2, please? The land is in the rural zone at the eastern part of Meringadan West, about 5 kilometres west of Highfields and about 1 to 2 kilometres west of Meringadan. In figure 1 on the screen, you can see the general location of the site in red. It's a little bit small to see, but you can see the white area to the east. Sorry, I'm not without a pointer, but the white area to the east is Highfields. If we go to figure 5, we can see the local zoning. The brown area surrounding the site is the rural residential zone, and the light green area is the rural zone. Next figure, please. That's it. So the site is centrally located with the red outline. The site has an area of 27.8 hectares with frontages to Peters Road to the west, Willis Road to the north and Spees Road to the east. In figure 4, if we could just go back one figure, might jump around a bit on this one, sorry Wendy. You can see the land is generally elevated. This is a relief map. The land is generally elevated with a ridge in the northwest or the top left corner, and that sheds water northwest to a drainage line that flows to Meringadan Creek, and it sheds water east directly to Meringadan Creek, which you can see to the east of the site. The blue areas on this map are in the flood hazard overlay, and they're likely to flood. There are 2 aspects of development in this application. There's a variation request and there's reconfiguring a lot for a 60-lot subdivision. The variation request seeks to establish alternative assessment provisions that would mean future development can be undertaken as if the land is in the rural residential zone, 4,000 square metre precinct. The applicant's submitted document, the Eagle Heights Variation Scheme Document version 3, dated November 2020, is included at attachment 3. The proposed 60-lot subdivision layout and staging can be seen in figure 9, please, Wendy. All lots are 4,000 square metres or larger, and all gain access to Peters Road to the west, Willis Road to the north, and new internal roads. No lots require direct access from Spees Road to the east. There are 2 new road connections to the existing road network. You see one at Peters Road and one... Oh, is it possible to zoom in on that a little, Wendy? So we see a new road connection to Peters Road at the bottom left of the screen to the west, and at the top of the screen we see a new road connection to Willis Road. There are also 2 terminating roads to the south, which can support connections when land adjoining to the south is developed. There's also a new pedestrian-only access at Spees Road. You can see the little section of 10-metre wide area between 44 and 45. Land at the east and southeast near Maringadan Creek is flood affected and will be dedicated to council for drainage. That's the area on the bottom right of the screen in particular, in blue, between lots 43 to 49 and Maringadan Creek and Spees Road. You can see that stage 1 creates a lot at the southwest, so the bottom left in purple, for an existing house. Stage 2 then creates lots fronting Peters and Willis Road, so up on the left and then across the top. Stages 3 and 4 extend internally from west to east, and stage 5 is at the east in the orange colour. Now, the planning scheme is an evolving document. Several versions of the planning scheme and a proposed amendment to the planning scheme, which has not yet taken effect, are considered relevant here. The application was lodged on the 1st of April 2020 under version 23, and this is the version the application is assessed against. Version 23 maps the land in the rural zone. On the 21st of August 2020, version 24 took effect, and on the 22nd of January this year, version 25 took effect. These deal with flood hazard and storm water. Also, proposed amendment number 20, which has been publicly notified and is currently with state government, seeks to rezone the site to rural residential zone, 4,000 square metre precinct. Wendy, if we could go to figure 13, please. So figure 13 shows the mapping associated with the proposed amendment number 20, and you'll see the site towards the bottom of the figure in the lighter blue hatch. And the note pointing to the site, which is a little hard to read at this scale, but it says the proposed amendment to rural zone 4,000 square metre precinct, rural residential 4,000 square metre precinct. The application has been assessed against version 23 and has been assessed having regard to versions 24 and 25 and proposed amendment number 20. Council's Local Government Infrastructure Plan, or LGIP, identifies key trunk infrastructure needed to facilitate development in the Priority Infrastructure Area, or the PIA. In figure 18, please, Wendy, you'll see that this site is entirely outside of the PIA. PIA is within the purple area. This means that Council has not planned or budgeted for trunk infrastructure that would be needed to facilitate the development. However, rural zoned land and rural residential zoned land is now ordinarily outside of the PIA. The LGIP, or the Local Government Infrastructure Plan, deals with 5 infrastructure networks. They are stormwater, transport, wastewater, water supply and parks networks. The LGIP does not prioritise trunk infrastructure works to service this development for stormwater, transport, wastewater and parks networks, but the LGIP does identify water infrastructure needed to service other development in the area and which this development would need in order to function. If you look at figure 19, if we go down one, Maybe a little difficult to see at this scale, but if we drag down a little and zoom in, you might just make out a grey line running left to right, east to west, south of the site, that grey line there. This is a trunk water main from Goombungie Maringadown Road to Highview Street Reservoir in Maringadown West. This trunk water main is needed to service existing land in the PIA. The LGEP identifies an establishment cost of $1.59 million for this work, and it's planned to be completed by Council this financial year. Council's water network engineers have confirmed that there is capacity in this trunk infrastructure to service all planned development in the PIA, plus the proposed development. Recommended conditions require this work to be completed prior to stage 2 of the proposed development, because the development would begin to generate additional water supply demand from stage 2 onwards. There's further detail about the LGIP networks in the technical notes included at attachments 5 and 6. The application was publicly notified and it attracted 3 properly made submissions. The submitters identified a range of issues, including potential impacts on water quality, flooding, public safety and amenity. The development is considered to be acceptable for the way it deals with these issues, particularly having regard to proposed amendment number 20, in which Council has expressed the intent for the land to be zoned as rural residential zone, 4,000 square metre precinct. Further details about submissions are provided in the report along with more detailed responses. The application was referred to State Government and State Government had no requirements. So to summarise and conclude, the development does conflict with the assessment benchmarks of version 23 of the planning scheme. However, the development deals appropriately with flood risk and stormwater for versions 24 and 25 of the planning scheme, and is consistent with Council's intent in proposed amendment number 20, which seeks to change the land to the rural residential zone, 4,000 square metre precinct. So despite the conflict with version 23, the assessment has determined that there are sufficient reasons to approve the development, and the application therefore is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the recommendation.
Thank you, Chris. Well done. Councillors, questions for the officer?
Just a question.
Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair, through you. Chris, just in regard to the timeframes for these stages and how that aligns with the capital works project you were talking about there before, is there an obligation on the developer to build within a certain time, or would they wait for council to actually build that infrastructure?
So there's no obligation on the developer to build within a certain time, but there's a recommended condition which gives the developer 5 years in order to act upon the approval. That's for the variation request and also for the reconfiguring a lot. They've been linked in the particular circumstances of this combined application. The recommendation in the report suggests or proposes that the conditions are timed so that the works have to occur, certain works have to occur, so certain works to sealing of Spees Road, to manage dust nuisance, for example, certain works for the trunk infrastructure upgrade to the water network has to be completed before certain parts of the development proceed. So in other words, the development under the current conditions that are recommended can't run ahead of the works. The conditions generally require works to be non-trunk infrastructure. The exception is the trunk water supply upgrade, which has been conditioned as trunk infrastructure. It's clearly trunk works. It's necessary for other development in the PIA. It's being constructed by council now anyway, and I suggest that there's a limited risk of the development preceding council's completion of the works. But if that does occur for some unforeseen reason, the developer has the ability to proceed with the development if it's approved, but they have to comply with the requirements of the, or they have to complete the works associated with the water supply upgrade.
Thanks.
And Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there's a more general question, perhaps I've got a question about Spies Road, and I disagree. If we could probably have the staging map up there. I'm not sure what stage that is.
Page
It's
5.
page 17 of condition 79, page 17 of 59. Spies Road, it says seal as part of stage 4 conditions, and I believe stage 5 is not substantive, and the preceding stages will heighten sensitivity for dust from Spies Road, and it will come from there. So if you have a look at the staging of there, stage 5 is very small stage, I guess, and the coloured ones, Wendy. Thank you. And the substantive 2 are the pink and the blue there. And when they're there, I guess that being a council that's been sitting around here for quite some time, when houses start arriving on those blocks, we're going to have unlimited complaints about dust from Spies Road.
The way the conditions are drafted is to require that Spies Road is constructed or sealed by the developer prior to any development of stage 5, which is the lot close to Spies Road, or any lot, if they change the layout at some stage, any lot within 80 metres of Spies Road. Now, Spies Road is actually currently in the works program to be completed this financial year.
But that can change, as you know. It's a decision made by council, and other things sometimes rise above that, and that may or may not drop down. But I'd be very concerned about that, because the substantive numbers are the blue and the pink, and the buff, or whatever you call it there. And should that happen, and Spies Road not be done, then we're going to have an issue where just that very outside, I don't know whether that's 80 metres, is it?
There should be a separation of 80 metres.
Yeah, but what
between...
would that be, Chris? Would that be 80 metres? I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, the way the conditions are drafted is that prior to Lot 5 proceeding, or prior to any development of any other land for residential or rural residential development within 80 metres of Spies Road. So Spies Road is gravel. It's a fairly basic road.
Very aware of it.
It's been closed recently due to flood impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's waiting for reconstruction from the flood event.
Yeah.
So, I'm aware of that. So I'm still not satisfied with that. Thank you.
Councillor Shine.
No, thanks, Chair. You mentioned before that the subject land is not within the PIA. Okay. I'm just interested because to the west of that is Meringadin, which would have to be in the PIA, obviously.
If we look at figure 18, I think, it may show us the outline of the PIA. So within the purple areas, within the PIA, that's right. So there's a gap between Meringadan and Meringadan West.
Oh, I see. So it sort of comes and goes, doesn't it?
It does.
But you could make a case.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vonhoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So if we have a look at page 34 of board books, and if I'm just thinking, okay, so I refer to page 34 of board books and also attachment 5, 6, and also the submissions. And generally speaking, one of the major concerns from submitters is around erosion and flooding.
Mm.
And in this report, it says a couple of times some things along the lines that it's not anticipated. This would, if approved, it's not anticipated to cause any noticeable differences to downstream flood characteristics. And Chris, I'm after some clarity, please, about how that determination is made, if it is based on this Act now of dividing up the MCU, or we talk about these lots being 4,000 square metres generally, or a little bit over, and there being enough pervious land in each of those lots to basically be able to absorb any water so that it doesn't make that noticeable difference. But can you shed some light for me, please, because I'm just not sure when we factor in impervious substances like driveways and sheds, and we don't know what's going to go on those 60 lots, how do we make the assessment that we can be confident that after the development's done on 60 lots, there won't be any noticeable downstream flood impacts?
I might ask if a representative of Development, Engineering and Plumbing could come and
Thank
speak
you.
to that.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, certainly Councillor Vonoff, concern over flooding is, of course, very much in the minds of people in Toowoomba. 2011 wasn't that long ago. It's important, and I think Wendy Sanjeewa may have given a document, an overhead before that we can look at that will help explain this issue. But basically this catchment, the catchment above this area goes all the way back to New England Highway, some 3,000 hectares. We've got a smaller catchment right near it of some, I think from memory, some 75 odd hectares. So the time of concentration between the body of that water, with a big chunk of high fields indeed, the great mass of that water, if you like, would be well behind any what is a much smaller flow from this particular site. You are correct. We have been caught in the past where broad assumptions about rural res haven't always been found to be correct when we've looked at small numbers of houses. So there's one particular area to the west that was developed some years ago where we have a street. Normally we'd say with rural res we might have, say, 25% impervious, 1,000 square metres on a 4,000 square metre block. Every so often we see that there might be several houses in a row with a tennis court and the impervious area is much greater. And with small numbers of houses we can be incorrect. Our assumptions with a large number of houses, some 60 odd lots that are transected here by roads, so we don't get a huge amount of area ever building up before it gets to a roadway, we're much more confident of that circumstance. But in this circumstance, the critical issue is the size of the overall catchment area and what we call the time of concentration, and this would be into the creek and well away before the 3,000 hectares actually contributes with the bulk of the water adjacent there in the creek, causing the Q100 flow.
Thank you.
With that, Councillor Bonhoff. Thank you, Dave. Councillor Summerfield.
Stretch, and it's not making a noise. I had a couple of questions, if I could please, Chris. One was around the proposed Amendment 20. Given that that's still with the Minister, are we able to actually use that in this process? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we can't assess against proposed Amendment 20 because it hasn't yet taken effect. That's why the assessment was actually undertaken against the planning scheme that was in effect when the application was made. That was version 23. We do have the ability to have regard to changes in train for the planning scheme under the Cody principle. That gives us the ability to add increasingly more weight to changes to the planning scheme as they progress through the fairly long process of amendment. This particular amendment, proposed amendment number 20, has been through public notification. It's been through state interest review. It's been endorsed by council in December, and it's back with state. The state has 40 business days, I understand. The Minister has 40 business days to issue their decision, and everything progressing as anticipated. Our strategic planning branch suggests that it may be back with council in the next month or two, and if it is endorsed by council and adopted, could be in effect within several months of today.
I was aware of all that. I just wondered whether we were able to actually use that against this.
Yeah, we can have regard for it in the assessment of the application, and I would suggest that if this particular application that we have before you today were to be refused, however proposed Amendment 20 went through and was adopted and came into effect, that this application, the reconfiguring a lot aspect of the development, would be code accessible and would be made fairly shortly after the proposed amendment number 20 was adopted.
Yeah, okay. So then my second question was around the water infrastructure, the upgrade to the trunk infrastructure. Given council's already in the planning for that, are we still able to get a contribution from the developer towards that?
So the recommended conditions require the works to be done before the development for stage 2 or later proceeds, and it's conditioned as trunk infrastructure, which means that if the developer was to proceed with that trunk infrastructure works ahead of council's timeframe, they could obtain a credit on their infrastructure charges or an offset on their infrastructure charges notice for the value of the works. It was done that way because the development, the water infrastructure network upgrade is required. It is proceeding. It's necessary to achieve an appropriate level of service for the existing land within the priority infrastructure area, and it's required for this development. So we have a program to complete that work this financial year. If that for some reason doesn't proceed, it seemed like an appropriate response based on the engineering assessment to allow the developer to construct those works at their cost and reimbursed by council through an offset on the infrastructure charges notice. The infrastructure charges notice also has a water supply network charge, so all of the lots are actually charged for increases in the demand on the water supply network.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Antonio?
Look, I just want to ask a question, and it's based on the fact that I spent a bit of time post the last major event in Toowoomba going to developments of this nature where they had slowly been added to and there became a drainage problem as a result of that. As they slowly went up the hill, water was certainly going into houses as a result of that additional non-pervious areas up there. And I speak of a particular place, I'll try and get it on a map for you down the track a bit, but there have been issues there. Can you assure me that there's going to be no additional water generated that will come across these blocks? Because there's no doubt when these blocks are built and everything happens, time of concentration changes and the potential for damage is higher. So I'm just wondering, is there any additional land, or will some of this have that impact that I saw out there in the same area?
So, Mr Mayor, if I might actually ask engineering to provide a full answer. I might just clarify whether you're referring to the development site itself, impacts on the development site, or impacts off-site caused by the development.
Well, I guess I'm referring to both. There's going to be more water as a result of development, but is there potential for further land to be developed that would bring more of this into the development?
So the question, if I'm correct, is there additional upstream or up-catchment land that could be developed that would affect the flows through this site? I might ask if Dave Quinlan can speak to that one.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's a very sensible question. We have seen over time throughout the region where we get an increase in urban development over time, we have further work to do in relation to stormwater. Yes, being an engineering type who often deals with stormwater issues, we often refer to stormwater as the ugly child of development. It's not perhaps the most glamorous of infrastructure in the same way as roads and water and the like are. But yes, as part of an overall catchment plan, that's why we put, as we have increases in impervious area, we build further detention basins, etc., to look at a catchment overall. On this particular site, certainly to the northeast, if you like, a floodplain. These lots are elevated in relation to the creek, and so we have a certain situation at that point where a small rise in height would obviously move over that what you'd call a floodplain area to the north and east of Spees Road. But yes, we have to continually look at developments. So, for instance, at Avenues development that has been going the last few years, quite a major detention basin was done as part of that, where we're detaining water high in the catchment for these very reasons. But that's why we have a transport and drainage planning area that looks at these catchments overall. Stormwater is an issue that can't be dealt with entirely on the single site. Its impacts coalesce at various places with what we call coincident floodwave peaks, and there's a need to look at a catchment in a broad context. Particularly a large catchment like this, some 3,000 hectares. There's also a catchment to the north that of course goes into Kubi, etc. There is a need to look at it. Your question is very sensible. In this one, we're quite confident that this development here, we can get water through it and safely into the creek, and the water going past it will be okay as well.
Just for the information of the staff, this was an historic pre-amalgamation subdivision that was approved, so that I saw it gradually added to the water flow. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate your answer.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. You might want to bring your microphone over so that, yeah. So Stuart can hear.
Just a question.
Question, Councillor McDonald?
Thanks. Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just can you talk briefly, Chris, in regard to the land, as is talked about on page 7 of 284 in Board Books and attachment 2, figure 7 to 9, the land in regard to the 1% annual exceedance probability, the AEP, the flooding land, and council to receive this in freehold, proposed lot 500. Can you just explain that? Is that basically to protect a wider area of the creek, the flooding of the creek?
So if we go to figure 4, that will show us, we start at figure 4, back to figure 4. That will show us basically the lay of the land. So you can see the areas in the flood hazard overlay in blue. Darker blue is higher flood risk. And you can see to the northwest, top left, there's virtually no overlap between the development site and the flood hazard overlay. There was no significant concern about that little portion of land. It was about 5 square metres within the relevant area. There's a lot of land to the bottom right, southeast, that is within the flood hazard overlay, and during the assessment we requested that the applicant consider dedicating that land to council. It's considered to be low value and high risk, so we suggested that the applicant may want to dedicate that land to council in order to first of all take the flood hazard, the flood-prone land out of the development site and developable areas, to provide a drainage corridor for the long-term management of floodwaters through the land and past the land, and also to limit the development potential within the land that is flood affected. So we're not so likely to get fences through that area. We're not so likely to get someone trying to put their on-site effluent into that area, storing materials and building sheds that are likely to impact flood. So yeah, if we go to figure 9, please, Wendy. So we can see on the right-hand side, that blue area, proposed lot 500. Perhaps, Wendy, you could just zoom into that bottom right corner of the coloured picture. So that blue area in proposed lot 500 and the little section of proposed new road at the bottom within the land, so the 6 metre wide section, that's all flood affected under our mapping, or it's access to the flood affected land.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor McMahon and Councillor Simon.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. The flood overlay mapping, is that Q100 or does it not work in those numbers?
So it's a little more complicated and nuanced according to the strategic planning section who worked on this. We've taken the the dark blue area and mid blue areas as the 1 in 100 or the 1% annual exceedance probability flood event. There's some green areas outside of that are a lower risk area. They can be overland flow, or they can be mapped for vulnerable use restriction areas, and they weren't considered particularly relevant to the assessment of a rural residential subdivision with relatively large lots and almost entirely outside of the flood affected area. So you can see the site is effectively the high point in the local area.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Summerfield?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wondered, Chris, about the operating hours for the actual implementation of the development. I couldn't see anything in there. The only thing I saw was that an operational plan would be submitted. Is that the case? Because if that is the case, is there a standard operational hours for doing a residential development that's in play, or?
Is this in regards to the construction works?
Mm-hmm.
Construction environmental management plan will be required for endorsement, and that will put limits on hours of operation and noise and impacts, particularly with a stage development. We try to be careful to manage potential impacts on the existing residents as the stages progress. So yes, that will be dealt with through a endorsement of a construction environmental management plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So my question is there's no detail of what those hours might be, and councillors do like to be aware of what hours, so that we ensure, that residents are looked after.
So this application is for preliminary approval for a variation request, which basically allows the developer or allows the landowner to do future rural residential style development, and also for reconfiguring a lot, which establishes the pattern and resolves the infrastructure questions at a kind of a broad, potentially conceptual level. Before any works proceed, the applicant would need to obtain development permits for operational work for all of their networks, so particularly for stormwater, for roads, and in those development permits there would typically be limitations on hours of construction works to manage or mitigate noise impacts on other residents.
Yeah, I get that, but understanding that won't come before council.
I can get Dave Quinlan to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we do apply standard conditions, working hours 6:30, 6:30. We take out Sundays and public holidays and the like. You'd be aware that we, on certain occasions in CBD areas and other things, night works and all the rest, where residents aren't bothered, you'll often see those extended hours working to minimise disruption to traffic and the like. But yes, we do control that through operational works. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Okay. Is there any further questions? So, okay, thanks, councillors. At this stage in the proceedings, we would normally have a presentation from a properly made submitter. You were all in receipt of an email from Ms Dawn Paulson that came on Monday, so I'm presuming that you've all read that. So I will then move on to the presentation by the applicant. Did you want to come and speak, Paul? Or?
Through the Chair, we believe that the matters... Through the Chair, we believe that the matters have been properly addressed as part of the presentation by Council's planner. Questions raised by councillors we believe have been answered appropriately. We agree with Council's position on how submitters' issues have been managed or addressed, and we don't feel the need to add any more. But certainly myself, Stuart Doyle from RMA Engineers, are here to answer any questions that councillors may have about the development.
Thank you, Paul. So is there any questions, councillors, for the applicant? No? I've got off lightly, Paul. That's great. Thank you. Saved myself 5 minutes. Okay, well, with that, can I have someone move that we reinstate standing orders? Councillor Vonhoff, Councillor Antonio, all those in favour? Okay, so the recommendation is that council approved the combined development application. So can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor McDonald, have a seconder. Councillor Melissa Taylor, all those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we move to item number... I have to suspend again, don't I? Can I have someone move that we suspend the standing orders? Thank you. I'm going to get it right one day. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Von Hoff, all those in favour? Okay, so we are to item number 6. And Councillor Melissa Taylor, I believe that you are leaving the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the material change of use for the service station on North Street, Harlexton, and we have Shakita is going to present for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. This report outlines an assessment of the development application for material change of use for service station. Thank you, Wendy. The subject land is situated on North Street between Mort and Ruffin Streets. It comprised of 3 contiguous lots with a total area of 6,069 square meters and frontage of approximately 60 meters to North Street. Please, can we go to figure 2? Figure 2, the next one, please. The subject site contains currently buildings, storage areas, and concrete batching areas that are associated with the current use of the site for precast concrete manufacturing. Each lot has its own driveway crossover. The land slopes from east to west and devoid of vegetation and landscaping. The frontage also contains 4 street trees. Please, can we go to figure 4? Thank you. The zoning map, please. The top one. Sorry. So, figure 3. So,
3.
Yeah, that one. That one. Thank you. The subject site is located in the medium impact industry zone and also bounded by land to the north, east, and west. The land is located in the medium impact industry zone as well. The land to the south of North Street is located in a low impact industry zone. All surrounded land contains existing industrial uses. Can we go to the next figure, please? The proposed development will be located in the front half of the subject site. The balanced area of the land will be maintained as a hard stand area and will be fenced off from the development site. Please, can we go to the next figure? The proposed development will be constructed in 2 stages. The first stage includes construction of the office with amenities, with a total gross floor area of 19 square meters, 6 fuel bowsers and a canopy for light vehicles refueling, 2 diesel fuel bowsers with a canopy for heavy vehicles refueling, 2 fuel tanks, a cage for swap and go gas bottles, cage for firewood, and also retail arts freezer. In the first stage, that all hard stand area will be constructed, and also car parking for 12 cars will be provided in the first stage. The service station will operate as unmanned facility in the stage 1. Stage 2 includes construction of a fuel shop with a gross floor area of 181 square meters and covered outdoor customer seating area. The proposed fuel shop will accommodate convenience retail space and small commercial kitchen. The building will be constructed of prefabricated panel, contemporary masonry, and aluminium frame windows. The proposed hours of operation are 24 hours a day, 7 days per week. Please, can we go to the landscape plan? It's figure 10. As you can see on the landscape plan, the proposed development includes landscaping to the corners of the side frontage, and along the western boundary, and along the fence between the development site and the balance area. Can we go to the next figure, please? According to the conceptual stormwater management plan, the proposed development will reduce the total impervious area by 1%, and therefore the storm quantity draining from the site will be reduced. The proposed development also will reduce the pollutants leaving the site compared to the existing situation through the use of stormwater quality improvement devices. Can we please go to the next one? And further. Yeah, thank you. The development is proposed to be serviced by 2 vehicle crossovers to North Street, with western access being entry only and the eastern access being exit only. The number of the side accesses will be reduced from 3 to 2 and will involve the removal of 2 street trees, which has been approved by the Parks and Recreation Services branch. According to the submitted traffic impact report, proposed development will increase the peak hour traffic along North Davidson and Buchanan streets by less than 5%, and therefore there are no requirements for upgrade of nearby intersections. This development application is impact accessible and has undergone public notification. 3 properly made submissions were received opposing the development. The main issues raised in the submissions are related to traffic impacts, economic needs, stormwater quality and quantity, air quality, lighting, and noise impacts. It is considered that the issues raised have been addressed by the applicant, and where applicable conditions can be imposed to ensure that the impacts of the development can be managed to meet the relevant requirements of the assessment benchmarks. Overall, the proposed development is considered to generally comply with the relevant assessment benchmarks of the planning scheme. Where applicable, the development can be conditioned to comply with the relevant assessment benchmarks. Accordingly, it is recommended that the proposed development be approved pursuant to the provisions of Section 60 of the Planning Act, subject to reasonable and relevant conditions.
Well done. Thank you, Shakita. Questions? Yes, Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you. Thank you. Thanks very much, Shakita. Just in regard to the traffic management study, I gather there was a traffic management study undertaken, and obviously the indications are that it won't increase traffic flow too much through that area. Was that assessment done through a time frame in day, given this is a 24-hour operation?
Can I ask the Assistant Engineer to answer this question, please?
Sorry, you're asking me something?
No, we're just going to have...
Development Assessment Engineer.
Oh, sorry, Shakita. Okay.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Through the Chair, they used a peak hour analysis in the TIA to determine what the worst hour in the day was and the impacts associated with that hour.
So, sorry, what was the methodology? Meteorology?
Peak hour.
Oh, peak hour.
Peak hour for the day. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Does that answer the question? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions? Councillor Summerfield?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to talk about trees, if I could. So we're removing 2 trees from the footpath to allow for driveways.
Yes, 2 trees.
Yep.
One next to the western driveway. Yes, it's shown on the landscape plan. One small tree and one eucalypt tree, but it was approved by Parks.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes?
Yeah, thank you. I could see there were 2 trees being removed. I'm just wondering, do we have anything in the planning scheme that says when we remove 2 trees, 4 trees have to be planted to replace them or something like that, given that that's what council tends to do, a minimum of double the replacement? I'm just wondering whether we have anything like that in the planning scheme, is my first question.
I'll just get the General Manager to comment there.
Well, there is a...
Sorry,
oh,
you go.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the parks people do have a policy in terms of additional trees being used when a street tree is removed, and there's also often a cost. But I'm not sure what the situation is here. We may pick that up in the conditions. But parks are normally a hard nut to crack in regard to removing street trees.
That's just one condition says that infer or give approval. This development approval does not infer or give approval to the owners or occupiers of the subject land or to disturb or remove street trees, other than those which approval has already been granted. So there is no further information about it.
I think it's a matter that's controlled by Parks through its policies that it has, and maybe when the applicant comes up to speak, they can address that particular issue in more detail.
Okay, thank you. So then on page 26 of the report, 140.8, it mentions a minimum 25% canopy cover. 25% of what is that referring to? I couldn't understand it.
Is it related to
140.8, sorry, on page 26, up the top, third 140.8.
You had it there.
Third one down. Provides a high degree of shade, minimum of 25% canopy cover at maturity over car park area and associated internal roadways. What was the 25% in reference to?
Well, it's... yes, that's an error. That's an error because there are no trees. There are no trees.
Sorry to interrupt again. I think that's an error, the inclusion of that particular condition, because it would normally not be included. Is that correct, Danielle?
Wendy, can we have a landscape plan, please?
Councillors, my understanding is that obviously condition 140 refers to landscape works, so it's requiring landscaping of the development such that there will be, when you look at 140.8, a high degree of shade provided over car parking areas and internal driveways, and the conditions requiring a minimum of 25% canopy cover, so that 25% of that area has a degree of shade that's created from the landscaping treatments that are proposed is my understanding of what that condition means.
So 25% of the whole...
It says car parking areas and associated internal roadways.
Is that realistic? I just wonder. I don't know.
Well, that is something obviously that would need to be determined through the submission of the landscape plan and negotiated with our landscape architect.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonham.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, I too had questions about trees, and Councillor Summerfield asked 2 of them. And I note that we talk about Parks having granted permission to remove 2 of those 4 street trees, and that, as you were saying, one is a smaller tree.
Tree.
Sorry?
Yes, smaller tree.
And then the other is a eucalypt?
Yes, eucalypt tree. Yes.
Are we sure about that, that the two aren't eucalypts?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay. Because they're beautiful trees on the street. And I will be seeking clarification as well, in line with Councillor Summerfield's question about the requirement to replant. And I also have a question about whether or not that granting of approval to remove those trees is consistent with our canopy, with our overall canopy policy, because my concern is that we make these decisions and it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts, and we make individual decisions, and nowhere in that report that I could see was there any description of the replanting. So if we're not being accountable incrementally, where are those other trees coming from?
Danielle? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, when you're looking at condition 139, it is referring in the note that there is a letter of approval that has come from the Parks branch who assessed this, who have granted approval for the removal of those trees. I don't know what that letter contains. I don't know if, Shahida, you've seen it.
I have seen it, but it was before that.
But it doesn't require... We'd have to check, but Parks... Oh.
Is someone from Parks here
require
to
replanting
answer?
of trees?
Through the Chair, no it doesn't. It requires a monetary contribution of
Oh.
$30,000. That I can elaborate further, but to answer that question, monetary contribution.
Often they will value, if they allow removal at times and they think the trees have some value. If they don't have value or they're diseased, then they'll just allow them to be removed. Sometimes if they're removed, they will assign, and they've got a procedure to do that, of value to the trees. Some councillors will remember that was what occurred with the second Bunnings development, where there are some quite significant street trees removed, that there was a monetary, and at Coho Street development, monetary value assigned such that that can go back into the fund to, I guess, provide other plantings or replacement plantings.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay. Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a concern between stage 1 and stage 2. So I tried to read through here, but I can't find where, should stage 1 be approved and stage 2 never happen? Have we got everything we need to have for landscaping and everything else attached to stage 1?
Yes, Councillor, thank you for the question. The landscaping will be included in stage 1.
Stage 1, thank you.
Complete.
And just if I might have a follow-up there, I note there's a left in, left out of this with the entrance.
Yes.
Thank you. It's very tight there, that's all, and there's a lot of heavy trucks, and that creek crossing's a little bit compromised, so it's got the capacity to cause a lot of congestion there.
Shakita, can I ask about the footpath, the requirement not to have a footpath? Is there a footpath running that it would have connected up to anyway? Or is there no footpath?
Currently, on North Street, we can... please, can you bring up the aerial? Yes, so there is a footpath running on the south of North Street up to the Buchanan Street, and it's terminated at the western side of the Buchanan Street. There is no footpath on either side of North Street after that. The proposed development wasn't actually required to construct the footpath because of the width of the road reserve that is, and also infrastructure and trees that is not allowing you to construct the footpath there.
If there's not a further question, did I read somewhere or did I dream it about a caretaker's cottage? It's opposite, is it?
Yes, so
the one that's being required to have the fence now built?
Well, it depends on the owner of the property. If they will agree with construction of the fence and landscaping to be provided, vegetation buffer along that North Street boundary, then the developer will be required to cover the cost.
Yes, okay, so that's on the southern side of
Yes,
North
on the
Street, across the
southern-
road.
across the
Okay,
road,
all right. And one other question from me, it's just with the, I think it's the engineer's report. What is they referring to when they talk about music screenshots? Do you know? Appendix D? It is literally music at a certain site, is it? At a certain point in the development?
It's talking about measurements and measurements.
To you, Madam Chair, it's a software, music is a software software package you use to model stormwater quality.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's an
How much
acronym.
music was allowed there, that's right. Okay. Yeah, I did.
Noise
Yeah.
nuisance, yes.
Okay, terrific, thank you. Okay, that was all I had,
It's a model.
It's a model, okay, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor O'Shea?
So thanks, Madam Chair. It may be one potentially that the applicant can speak to, or potentially one of our officers here. It probably carries on from similar line of questioning that Councillor Taylor and McDonald had, just around an explanation a bit further around that impact, the traffic study. So, and as I said, it might be something the applicant can address, but just we're looking at, like just reading through it the other night and catching up today, when you said it's done at peak, so we're assessing it at 132 vehicles an hour. Is that what I read as peak? I guess I'm just asking a bit more of an explanation and comfort around how this traffic modelling and study and how this is not going to have adverse impacts, I suppose, in ways in terms of this, if this development goes ahead in this particular area with the increase of traffic coverage.
Can I ask development assessment engineers to...
Thank you.
Through the chair. So the TIA looks at the existing background traffic, and I believe that was based on traffic counts from 2018. Then they look at the expected development traffic and the traffic, they adjust the 2018 background traffic up to 2020 when the application came in. Then they project that through to 2030, 10-year design horizon, figure out the development traffic and then add a 10-year design horizon to that, and then work out the percentage increase as a result of this development. And for all streets, that was under 5%, which is considered not to warrant road upgrades. So for North Street, that was 1.5%, Davidson 1.2%, and 4.7% on Buchanan.
Does that answer your question, Councillor O'Shea? Yeah.
Sort of.
And TIA means traffic impact analysis.
Thanks, Stuart.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, I just said thanks, Stuart.
Councillor Carol Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to follow on from Councillor O'Shea's, that's one of the bridges that was studied on North Street there by National Heavy Vehicle and the grant money from the federal government. So that road, that piece of road carries quite a lot of heavies there. And it's a concern, I suppose, I'd need to be reassured, and I suppose that's where Councillor O'Shea is coming from, that that we have got cumulative and that we allow for the constriction of that and the state of it at the moment, and the increased likely heavy vehicles that will be entering and egressing this property. So I suppose, can I have an engineer assure us about that, thanks?
Yeah, through the chair.
Sorry. Yep.
Oh, sorry. The applicant might be able to answer this one a bit better,
Okay,
but I
thank
can
you.
have a crack if you like.
Yeah, no, please, yes.
So it's currently an existing industrial area, so it would already have a high percentage of heavy vehicles going through it.
Mostly.
And as I said before to Councillor O'Shea, the development traffic is expected to be pretty negligible, so in comparison to background traffic. So.
Well, I just as a follow-up there, I wonder why they're even putting it there if that's what we expect, and they wouldn't be building it if they didn't expect to have a reasonable clientele.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, Councillor Von Hoff had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll also direct this one to the applicant when we get that opportunity, but that land slopes down to the creek, and I've gone through the reports, and I'd love to just be talked through by our department, please, on that west side of the site, the measures that are in place there, so that we don't get fuel runoff heading west down into the creek and then off down into the broader catchment, please, because you'll appreciate it's quite technical, and I'd love just to be talked through that.
Yeah. Alrighty. So through the chair. So a service station you would design with a bunded area around the fuel canopy, so that any fuel spilled in that area goes to a separate puriceptor, they call it. It's a device that collects all the fuel, purifies it if it can, but basically fuel is contained in a separate stormwater system.
That's the grate. Sorry, Madam Chair. That's the grate that's identified on one of the figures.
A grate. I think it's
that
usually
underneath the
appears more
grate?
as a tank. So. Figure 11. Yep.
Hmm.
11, please, Wendy. Yep. Yes, so it looks like a grate, but it's a tank type structure. Yeah.
Oh, just finding it a bit hard to hear. If you can just speak a little bit closer to the microphone. Thank you.
It appears to be a grate on the drawing, but it is a underground tank type structure. It's got ribs on it, so that's why it looks like a grate.
And supplementary, if I might, Madam Chair, and how much does that store?
I believe it's designed to hold one busted fuel tanker. I think that might be a question Luke might be able to answer.
I assume it's
That's correct.
standard,
Yep.
whatever. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor McMahon?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering, this is in an industrial zone and accordingly. Right next to, north of the development site, is that a house, a residential house? It just appears planted out from the mapping, etc.
So to the north,
along Davidson Street, touching...
along the, yes, so there is a dwelling house to the north, but it's looks like a caretaker's accommodation with a low impact industry use on the site.
And is it because it's industrial we don't take receptor from that premises, or?
Between the development site and that dwelling house, there is a 60 metres distance. And there will be a fence between the development site and the balance area.
60 metres?
Yes, 60 metres.
Which is not inordinately big.
No, I'm not following. So see where the red of this development is, and touching the northern boundary, those trees there, like right there?
Yep. Yes.
That premises you're saying is 60 metres from it?
Yes, from the development site, yes.
Okay. Sure.
I think because it's down to the lower part of the...
Yeah. And so we don't need to worry about impacts on this to that property?
Well, I guess Luke probably will talk about this.
Through the chair. Councillor, how are you? Yes, that would be considered a sensitive receptor. If a complaint was made from that resident, then if it was deemed reasonable, then the usual process for complaint noise investigations would occur. We have conditions set out as normal through that. This particular development is being in the industrial zone. It's been given a background plus criteria of the 15 properties surrounding the development site. 6 of those have approvals from council that have unrestricted operating hours and background plus noise limits. A further 6 of those 15 have no time restriction for any of their operations whatsoever. So on the whole, with the layout that's proposed, the distance to the receptor, the fencing from the end of stage 1
towards the receptor, it was deemed that the risk would be low, operations can proceed. In the event of a complaint, we've got conditions that can be managed.
Great answer, thanks.
Further questions? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Just in regard to economic need, that was one of the issues that was raised. I guess it might be a question for, and I read the report, the response of why that is, and maybe you could elaborate on it, Shakita. However, it might be a question to the applicant as well, because I just can't believe how many service stations we have going up in our area. And so whether they can talk about the trends of service stations to give us a bit of pre-warning of the marketplace or not, I'm not sure, but it's quite amazing. I understand the response here, but just from an applicant perspective, I wonder if they get many of these come over their desk as well. It's more of a comment, probably.
Did you? Well, we'll get to that. If you don't have any comment, we'll get a response from the applicant. Yeah. Is that okay, Shakita?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any further questions or comments to the officer? Okay, so we have got one submitter here, Ms Sharon Swan. Would you like to come and you've got 5 minutes to speak to the councillors?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mayor.
Pull your microphone nice and close.
And councillors, sorry I've not done this before, so I'm a wee bit nervous.
No, you're right.
Right, I have business properties that cover North Street and Jones Street, so I'm here today talking for myself and also for Ian and Jan McQuinlan, who are the residents of Davidson Street, the house we have just been talking about, and their family has been living there for 80 years.
Oh.
I've seen a lot of very interesting points said here today and the issues that we were talking about. Yes, the traffic concerns, those statistics were taken in 2018 if you read it. Now I know how much traffic zooms up and down Jones Street, Davidson Street and North Street, and I would be questionable of the statistics that are in this report and how much they're going to affect us. As for the trees, they are magnificent. They are beautiful sentinels and they should not be removed. But in that, we do respect innovation and change, and it has to happen. But the question is, do we really need this? Yes, there are a lot of service stations. We have a new one diagonally opposite the old West factory going in. There is 700 metres up the road on the corner of North and Ruthven. If word is correct, and you folk will know, there is a service station supposed to be going in on the corner of North and Mort Street. So there's another 700 metres, and there are the bevy of ones down near Bunnings. Are we becoming the lazy city? Are we too afraid to drive 700 metres to a service station? Of course, there is the rail bridge. We all know about the Woolworths truck that had a close encounter of the most immediate kind, and the rubbish from that truck is still there this afternoon when I came through. But there's also the North Point Shopping Centre. In asking the question about do we really need it, that's a pretty spectacular thing up there. But the number of vacant shops and the number of businesses that just have failed, the bakery failed, the florist failed, the hairdresser failed and the post office failed. The question is, do we really need a service station? Another one in this area. Question to council is that the change is coming. Cars with petrol and diesel engines are on their way out. It won't be too much longer when you go to the dealer and you select an EV. Our own vehicle died at the end of 2019. We bought an electric vehicle. So I am serious about what our vehicle should be. Council should be looking towards an EV precinct. The tourism that this city depends on is pretty important, but there are very few spots where you can plug in your EV. If I want to use a public site, I have to go to Charlton. That's not exactly the centre of town. And EVs don't charge quickly. They take a little while. They're much longer than it takes to just chug some fuel into your petrol tank. So we need somewhere for the EV cars, the future tourists of this city, to park, leave their car, go and have a cup of tea, a coffee, a meal, all those dollars that matter to this city, where they can leave their car and go and do it, unless you plan on putting a PowerPoint at every parking spot in Grand Central. And I don't think anyone wants to do that. So the lazy crime, that's the other thing. One thing I can tell you about is that we do have a very dodgy crime problem down there, that end of town. It's not good. I know that our site was attacked 2 weeks ago. We weren't too happy about that. So that is a concern of the other businesses in the area that I have spoken to. And additionally, I should say that the reason the crime happens is because it's such a quiet area. And there is a concern that the service station will bring more people coming, you know, in the depth of night to come and get a hamburger and possibly do things that they shouldn't be doing.
Getting close, Sharon?
Sorry,
You're
yes,
getting close?
yes,
Yep.
okay. So yes, the noise of cars, the 24 hours, you've already covered a lot, councillors. Thank you very much of the points that we had identified, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Well done. Stay there, Sharon. Is there any questions for Sharon? Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's in regard thank you very much, Mrs Swan, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for that. My question is in regard to your questioning of the traffic report. And I'd like, if you could please expand on your hesitations or doubts that you had concerning this particular report, please, and appreciate you might not have it in front of you.
Yeah. No.
And if you need a report, please let us know. Maybe we can get one up there. But what is it in particular that you find objectionable in the traffic report, please?
All right. North Street is busy constantly. It doesn't really have a peak hour. It's a peak, or pretty well all the time. When a train goes through, and a train will cross North Street twice, the traffic jams are just incredible. That it banks up in both directions because the train crosses the street. The service station is at one end of it, but it does cross both ways. So you would just get massive build-up, and I would suggest, and it's when it's a school run, oh man, it's just really seriously busy. If with our business we want to go out and do something, you don't go during the school run time and try and get on North Street. It's just not worth it. So that's my point there. One other thing I did forget was the flooding. We lived through the 2011 flood, and I can assure you, being on a hill like that, the volumes of water that came through were just astounding. And we thought we had good stormwater diversion on our place, and it was nothing in comparison to what came through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask, thank you very much, Mrs Swan, for your presentation. The house in question that's the closest receptor, I do have concerns about lights and whatever, despite being told that it's 60 metres away. If you've got particularly transport trucks which have got high lighting, high trucks, is there been any discussion, and I don't see it in here, on a fence for that property?
I don't know, but I do believe from Ian and Jan there's been no consultation with them, and the lighting is a concern for them.
Yes.
They are concerned about
Yes, I'm concerned about that as well. Thank you. I'll ask the submitter.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor McMahon.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, another question. No, that house immediately to the north, the only reason I thought it was a house is because of the quite obviously well-maintained trees around that site. So, nice little oasis there. I'm just wondering, this site as it stands now, does it have a fair bit of industrial activity on it now, in your opinion? And would that be vastly different operating as a service station to what it's operating now?
Oh yes, I would imagine so. Some years ago, Toowoomba tanks were on the site, making the concrete septic tanks, storage tanks, that sort of thing. They left a few years ago now, and there is a concrete sleeper manufacturing place in there. So I don't see a great deal of truck activity. I'm not standing there watching to see what they do, let's put it that way, but I would think that a service station would attract more traffic, yeah. And it's a fairly narrow road.
And that's very
North
narrow.
Street.
Yeah, no, I suppose a concrete, sorry, Chair, follow-up, concrete sleeper manufacturer probably would make, you know, does it make a fair bit of noise, and would it be similar to the
I
operations
never
of the
hear.
service station?
I never hear any noise from them.
Septic tanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor?
Madam Chair, not for Mrs Swan. If I could just ask, just clarify a question with our planner. The residents in Davidson Street would far predate the industrial, I suggest, in this area. So I suggest that probably we should be looking at retaining some of their amenity should this go ahead, and we haven't considered it to date.
We were going to get the applicant to address that when they present. Thank you very much, Sharon. Terrific. Thank you. So now, who's going to present on the behalf of the applicant? Do you want to? Yes, Jess. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to present. My name's Jess Garrett from Precinct Planning, and I represent the applicant. I will just respond to some of those specific questions rather than giving you a general presentation. I'll start with the trees. The trees, the street trees specifically, when we first looked at this site, it was the first matter I looked at and said this is going to be a problem. Toowoomba has a proud heritage of protecting its street trees, and quite rightly these trees are lovely. The consideration for the trees was something that we engaged with Council through the pre-lodgement process. We had a pre-lodgement meeting, we submitted detailed plans, we had Parks and Recreation as part of that pre-lodgement advice, and we actually worked really hard to try to not remove the trees. As you can see, there's 3 existing lots, there's 3 existing accesses, and it's also in the medium impact industry zone. So there's some sort of, it's not as of right, but there's a fair expectation that access to this site will be required by larger vehicles. Larger vehicles require wider driveways. So we worked through a number of proposals with Parks and Rec and Development Services, and tried to have one access. We tried to move the accesses around. In the end, the removal of the small western tree and one of the larger gum trees was the best solution we could come up with. And so it was through consultation that we were given approval to remove those trees. So Parks and Rec have imposed essentially a value on those trees. As a first point of call, they looked at replacement trees in the area. They have a general catchment that they looked to put replacement trees in. They decided that there weren't any appropriate locations to put the replacement trees in, and so they then went to their amenity contribution. And for the 2 trees, it's around about $30,000 that we need to contribute, or the developer needs to contribute to Council. So it certainly wasn't a first port of call to remove the trees, but in the end that was the best solution. With regards to the footpath that was raised, obviously service stations are suitable in the medium impact zone where they can be accessed by walking and cycling, and where they service the local catchment. In this instance, the service station primarily is a service station that services the local catchment. It's an unmanned service station in stage 1, and its primary market is heavy vehicles. There are 2 heavy vehicle Bowsers, and it may be likely that it remains as an unmanned service station, and it doesn't have that convenience retailing that so many other service stations rely on. The primary market is the industrial zone. In saying that, having a pedestrian footpath at the front of the site is desirable. This is a distributor route. It's expected that walking and cycling is a method that people could access this site. But given the constrained nature of the footpath, in that footpath you've got the big street trees and then you've got an absolute myriad of underground services. We've had extensive consultation with infrastructure trying to basically negotiate around these underground services, and so in the end council's decided that it's not the best location for a footpath. We did offer to possibly put a footpath on the southern side of North Street to basically continue that existing section of footpath that's already there, but Development Services has not conditioned that at that stage, but that was one option we did put forward.
House and the economic need, Jess.
And the economic need. Economic need is typically required in a planning context where you're putting a development in a location that's not envisaged. So in this instance, it's been determined that the use complies with the strategic direction of the scheme. It complies with the purpose and the overall outcomes of the planning scheme, and so therefore the economic need wasn't required. Service stations and childcare centres at the moment are the flavour of the month. Coming across our desk on the private side, that's what's happening. The planning scheme doesn't regulate the location in terms of the numbers or the location of uses. That basically is determined by the market. And councils, I agree that there are a number of service stations, but it will be the market that determines which ones actually get constructed and which ones are successful. And so in terms of what the planning scheme regulates, it regulates whether it is in a suitable strategic location, and that's determined by the zone, and then the details around it. And at this point in time, council is recommending approval subject to those conditions that make it suitable.
Just the existing house in Davidson Street.
So the existing
lights.
The lights. It is in the medium impact zone, but it has been there for many, many years. The development site area is on the southern side of the site, so as Shakita pointed out, that the development's actually 60 metres away. We will be providing a fence at the rear of the site, at the rear of the development site, that will separate the development site from the balance area. If necessary, I don't know, in terms of your angles, sometimes the angles and the topography of your land, even if you did put a screen fence up, you can only put a fence up to say 2 metres tall without sort of further approval. I'm not sure whether a 2 metre tall screen fence put in that location would be a benefit. The other alternative would be to put a screen fence along just that section that would screen the caretaker's residence from the development. And that's been the solution proposed for the headlights coming out of the development to the residents on the southern side of North Street.
Is there anything else that you wanted to address? That were the ones that I had written down, but councillors, did you have any other questions that you feel as though they haven't been addressed? Councillor Von Hoff?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Thank you very much, Jess. I'll go back to my question about the protocols that are in place. Given the proximity of the creek and the slope, now in the event of an intense rain event, we were told that that grate and the underground tank holds the equivalent of one fuel tanker. Sorry?
One compartment within the tanker.
One
so when
compartment.
you bulk tanks, there's sections within it.
Okay.
They would unload those separate.
Okay. So are we confident that in the event of an intense rain activity, that underground storage would hold all of the runoff, all of the petrol, so that it would be captured and it wouldn't go downstream into the creek?
Madam Chair, can I get Brian Lamb from Leroy Palmer?
Yes, lovely, thank you.
To respond to that one?
Yep.
Thank you, Jess.
Hi, yep. In regards to the stormwater drainage and the under canopy, so there's a grated drain around the entire fuel canopy, and within, so the car pulls up and that's where they get refueled, and if there's any fuel spillage, that gets collected in grated drains and goes into a device that's called a spell puriceptor, and the spell puriceptor separates any clean stormwater out of the fuel. The Puriceptor stores the fuel, and when it gets to a certain limit, a truck would come in and service the Puriceptor, remove the spilled fuel and dispose of it appropriately. Now, in the event of a large rain event, the Puriceptor is designed to be able to accept a certain flow rate of stormwater discharge. So the stormwater will go through the stormwater will be treated through the Puriceptor, and the fuel will remain in there for future collection.
Thank you very much for that explanation.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor McMahon?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. I think you may have touched on. Is there a timeline for this development, or is it the developer has some scope to wait until market conditions, or do you have any information on that?
Through you, the Chair, I'll just check the conditions. Typically, material change of use has 6 years in order to commence the use. And sometimes when you have a staged approval, like this one, no. Sometimes conditions can be imposed to require that, say, stage 1 is commenced within 6 years, and then the subsequent stage must be commenced within a certain period after that. And if you don't do it, then that second stage lapses essentially. At this point in time, the development hasn't been conditioned. It just default back to the default 6 years. So typically, once the first stage would have been commenced, then stage 2 could be done at any time after that.
Thank you.
Is there any other further questions, Councillor
Question,
McDonald?
thanks,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Jess. Just the traffic impacts, and I guess you've explained the first stage and of heavy vehicle and timing for those. We spoke about the study being, or TIA, being at the peak period. Would you just like to make a comment on the traffic impact study and the confidence you have in how reflective that actually is of now and into the future of this site?
Councillor, I'll make a general comment, but I will get Brian to, as he's the engineer, he can talk more specifically about it. Essentially, when you prepare a traffic report, you basically take the traffic stats that you can obtain. Typically, council keeps those statistics, and then you extrapolate that out. And taking basically the worst case scenario, which is peak, the peak period, and then you basically add on the development. So in this instance, service stations in general are typically uses that seek to capture traffic that's already on the road. And so people don't usually go out and just go and fill their car. They usually do it on their way somewhere else. So the increase in the traffic is has a certain assumption in terms of the amount that's already on the network, and then make some assumptions in terms of that additional traffic. So given that I know North Point has contributed, I don't disagree that North Street is a busy street. It's intended to be. It's a distributor route, and North Point has probably contributed to a lot of that. But North Point has now been operating since prior to 2018. So the traffic stats that were taken from 2018 and then extrapolated out, they would include that North Point traffic. So, Brian, do you have?
Yep. Regarding the traffic impact assessment, so in consultation with Council, the latest traffic count data available was received for North Street, Davidson Street and Buchanan Street. And then, yep, that was all extrapolated to 2021. That was assumed when the fuel station would open. And then it was also extrapolated out to 2031. To just check the 10-year design horizon. And so we use that to determine the existing peak hour traffic on the road. Well, that gave us the existing peak hour traffic on the road. And then regarding the traffic generation for the service station, there's a published manual which provides traffic generation rates for different size developments, different different types of developments, and that manual, which was used as per industry practice to determine the expected peak hour turning traffic into the site. And that was also extrapolated out to the 10-year design horizon of 2031. And then I got had the peak hour traffic on the existing road network, and I had the peak hour traffic in 2031. And then comparing those numbers, it was found that in the design horizon, the service station will be generating less than a 5% traffic increase. So we'd be looking at up to 1.5% increase on North Street, 1.2% increase on Davidson Street, and a 4.7% increase on Buchanan Street. So with those factors there, also due to the fact that the existing development, it certainly is acknowledged the existing development does have less heavy vehicle traffic going to the site than the service station will. But the existing development does have heavy vehicle traffic, and it has 3 entry and exit crossovers, whereas the proposed design is for 2 concrete crossovers, 1 entry only, 1 exit only. And then with the traffic data we received from Council, it provides a split of the existing cars that use North Street and the existing percentage of heavy vehicles that use North Street. So yeah, we also looked at that, but basically when it came down to that through our traffic impact assessment, that we're having a less of a 5% increase, and we checked how the North Davidson and North Buchanan Street intersections, and from the Ost Roads traffic intersection manual, it was determined that no intersection upgrades were warranted for the site. So I hope that answers your question.
Can I, while you're still there, you can confirm it's left in, left out?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that correct? I know you are.
Left in, left out.
That's right.
Right in, oh, sorry.
You can come right in, heading west along North Street. You can go right in.
Yep.
Oh.
And the current, it's currently conditioned as left in, right in, and left turn out only.
Left in, right in.
I was wondering, yeah. Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just while you're there, thank you for that. Can you confirm with this report that it does take into account, during those peak times, the instances where trains do come to the west and east of the site on North Street there? Because I think we've all driven on North Street when there has been a train and the traffic does back up.
Yep.
It is a problem. So does this report, I can't see the words train or anything like that mentioned in here. Does it take into account the trains passing?
The report with the available data takes into consideration the peak hour traffic, but if there's a train crossing the railway and traffic has to stop, then the road will be affected very similar to how it already is.
With the increases in traffic?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but pre-development, when the train stops at the railway crossing, North Street is affected, and post-development, it also will be affected. And my report, I expect that there would be up to 1.5% increase in traffic. So, you could expect that there could be 1.5% more vehicles lining up waiting to cross the railway.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, thanks. Just while we're talking traffic, not sure who's best to answer this, but entering and exiting the site, particularly going from the west, into the site and the slope of the land, if you're in a heavy vehicle, is there, and I don't think there is there an area, a slip lane or something that gets the trucks off, or a larger area in the site that will take trucks into the site if they're waiting to fuel?
Within the site, there is manoeuvring space available for AVs to be parked if they have to wait.
Okay.
But as far as turning into the site, a right turn of a heavy vehicle into the site on North Street will behave just like a heavy vehicle turning into any of the other developments on North Street. So the vehicle behind would likely have to wait for the heavy vehicle in front to turn right before being able to pass.
Yeah, and there's from recollection, well, Jess, you might be able to answer on the site itself to have trucks removed from the road.
Excuse me, Wendy, can we just have a site plan, please? Just with the development layout on it. Figure 4? Okay, so the heavy vehicle fuelling is at the rear of the site. So if trucks come in, say they turn left off North Street and they go along the western side of the site down to the diesel pumps at the rear. So you could have two trucks refuelling at the rear, and you would still have all that space along the western side of the site for AVs or heavy vehicles to queue while awaiting a free Bowser. So it, and of course, if there's a refuelling vehicle also standing on site, it's been conditioned that stands wholly on site. So I think that the diesel Bowsers have been located at the rear for that reason, to accommodate that queuing and that situation.
Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd actually like to have clarification, please, of condition number 66.7 on page 12 of 53, where we've just been told, and it's not clear, I was under the impression it was left in, left out. That doesn't make it clear. I cannot support cannot support a right turn going west into that site. And that clause there condition does not make it clear. I read it to say that there should be exit only. Eastern access must be exit only with no right turn, and the western access must be entry only. So it's not clear in there that there's going to be a right turn from the western bound lane.
Councillors, I read that as it can be entry from either direction, but that exit is no right turn. So, yes, either direction for entry and one direction on exit.
Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
I just, that entry from both directions, I'm wondering if you could provide, if it was left in, left out,
I could support it.
Perhaps you'd just have the heavy vehicles going Jellicoe Mort in that way, and then putting more trucks on those streets to use it, whereas coming off Ruthven onto North and right in. So if it was left in only, means you'd have to be coming east, and they'd probably have to go around the block. Do you have any data on where, if it was left in, left out, it might create more traffic problems, or just thinking out loud?
Create more safety.
No, I guess I probably can comment just from a common sense point of view rather than a technical point of view, that typically a heavy vehicle would endeavour to access a site left in terms of, particularly with the gradient of North Street, I would imagine that a heavy vehicle operator would prefer not to turn right into the site. But yes, certainly if you had a left in, left out arrangement, yes, it does cause more circulation issues in the locality. I think just excuse me.
And sorry, and follow up. You're talking about the grading of the road. It's down a hill. And you're saying trucks probably wouldn't turn right in there? Or it wouldn't be?
I can't comment on that from a technical point of view, but from a practical operation, I would imagine that heavy vehicles would endeavour to do left in, left out.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, why have it then, I suppose? Anyway.
I think it should be left in, left out.
Yep. So, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the biggest issues that Queensland's had massive road fatalities and road accidents in the last 12 months. And in reality, it doesn't matter who's at fault. If there's a heavy vehicle and a car, there's a loser. And I cannot support this as being a right turn in there. That's a very narrow road reserve. It carries a lot of heavy traffic and it's constrained. And I cannot support a right turn in going on the westbound lane. Thank you.
Well, perhaps that might...
and it's for road safety, not for anything else.
Are there any other questions? Councillor O'Shea.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if Jess can answer this, someone else. So those conditions that we have on that, would I be right in assuming that they are the identical conditions that exist on the existing service station 600 metres down the road in terms of off North Street, the accesses, the entries? I think they are.
It's not as constrained.
The one on the corner of North and Ruthven.
It's not as constrained.
It's got a couple of different entrances though, hasn't it?
It's not constrained
But
like
it's
that is.
Can
It's on
Councillor McMahon, do you have a further question, or can anyone? Hang on, I might just. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
Councillor O'Shea, did you want an answer? No, just not able to answer. Councillor McMahon.
Does Aldi, Taylor's Removals, or anyone else along North Street have an availability for a right turn in?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Existing use.
Existing?
Councillor, if there is a recent approval, I'm not sure, like Aldi obviously would have development conditions. If you've got an existing operation that has been there, an existing lawful use, often there aren't development conditions. But possibly maybe the development engineers may be able to shed some light.
Well, just a point of clarification, Madam Chair, I think our people should be answering these questions, not the applicant. As good as Jess is, and thank her very much, but it's our people that should be answering these questions.
Dave's coming up to give us an answer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been some questions, obviously, about access to the site. I would agree with Danielle, who spoke there before. Certainly, it's the intention of officers, the way that condition is written, 66.7, western access may be entry only. It was deliberately the intention of officers that there would be left in, heading east, right in, heading to the west on that western entrance, with left out. I would also make the point that to make it left in, left out there, as you know, to enforce that in any real way, we find great difficulty with that without some sort of central median or other device that would allow that. Without that sort of device, you might attempt with signage or some such. But for the point of this discussion, I suppose I'm just pointing out the practicality at that site of making it left in, left out. The median, of course, has to be a certain amount of width and has to have signage and lighting, etc., that many councillors here would be, of course, aware of. So I just point out the challenge to that. Certainly at the moment there would be...
If I could just ask, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr Quinlan, we don't have the road width there to have that. And that's what I'm saying about road safety.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. I think Mr Quinlan was just going to make that point.
Is that the case?
So through you, Madam Chair, certainly, Councillor Taylor, I would agree that the road width is what it is, and that's why I'm making the point, for the sake of the fullness of this discussion, that limiting the right turn in, heading west in the southern lane, make it clear, turning right in, to restrict that in a practical way, as things stand there on that road, would be quite difficult to implement practically. I just make that point. Were there other questions in relation to traffic generally?
So we just...
Or have I clarified what? Oh, another question through you, Madam Chair, that I heard spoken about was the volume that this would draw. It is true and I've seen some of the material, I think, from one of the submitters, that generally service stations are placed on larger intersections. It is true that retail trade, and that is what a lot of our service stations are participating in, not just the fuel, but the if you like, the corner store that goes with them now. Oftentimes, they benefit from a high volume area where people will go past. I would say that this site is visible to those who are using North Street, but not necessarily as visible to others who may be remaining on Ruthven Street, etc. In terms of the way we treat rail crossings, it's determined that when a rail crossing is in use by the trains, that period of time, yes, will often saturate various roads if you don't have grade separation. And yes, Griffith Street, Bridge Street, particularly near Bunnings, Jellicoe Street, North Street, we've all been aggravated at times when a train is going through. The longer the train, yes, but the way traffic analysis is done, the idea is when there is a train that there will be storage in that road which we would normally not allow for normal operations. That is true.
Okay. Any further questions? No? Councillors? Thank you. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Okay. Can I have someone move that we reinstate standing orders? Councillor Von Hoff, Councillor Taylor, all those in favour? So the recommendation is there before you that council approve the application for a development permit for a material change of use impact service station in 2 stages, subject to conditions below. Do I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Summerfield, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All those in favour? So there's 10, 8.
You might have to ask for debate.
You have to have a division.
7,
division.
4, and then
Bills away.
Councillor Von Hoff and Councillor Taylor against. So it's carried.
God help us.
Very good. So that.
Accident. See what happens.
Don't you have to record because there's someone missing? Yeah. Thanks, councillors.
I really don't.
That conclude the meeting. Yes.